because wow, okay.
Reporting in progress. There you go.
Counting my blessings, almost died yesterday, and so I'm really thankful that I'm still here.
Really?
Yeah,
Almost died yesterday. You can't leave us hanging like that.
yeah. We went to a ground golf place to go play some ground golf, and it's a dinosaur theme area. And so, aside from dodging the dinosaurs, they had like a hike through this forest area. And it looked like nobody from the compound had been back there to, manicure it or take care of it. So it was just full of spider webs and massive spiders along the path. And so we had to dodge that. I had to get me this stick. I'm walking through like we're on safari, and I'm like beating the path as we go through. And we finally make it, you go down and around and up on the other side, and we're finally coming through, and we can see the way to get back onto the course. And there's this snake that just comes across our path, and thing's like 5 feet long. It's like, Jesus Christ.
What kind of snake?
I have no idea. I don't know. It was a snake and it was moving. So I don't know. I didn't ask it what kind it was.
So based on these facts, we are stipulating that you almost died because you were in close quarters with snake.
Yeah, and the spiders. And then we finally did get to start our ground golf game, and 5 holes in, the sky just opened up, and there was thunder and lightning and just coming on down. So
see, I don't think most people associate the words "I almost died" with ground golf.
Yeah, that was definitely about almost death. It was almost what it was.
Well, we are counting our blessings because Jay is still with us. We are also counting our blessings because we are joined once again by Sheba Abraham from the League of Women Voters. And I know you were on a mission of your own recently, right? What's going on, Sheba?
Yes, my mission. I attended the United Way breakfast of Orange and Dutchess in Orange County this morning, where they awarded people that perform acts of kindness.
Oh, wow.
So it was, they award, and they had quite a few nominees, and then they had the top 3 that they awarded prizes to, or gave them, I would say, plaques, because they're really outstanding out of everyone in the community. So that was quite interesting, and they had a lot of lovely gifts. So it was a nice breakfast. And
that
also
sounds like the event I attended, which I'll get into in a minute.
Yeah,
and also and also after that, I went to voter registration on Dutchess Community College campus, and I found that quite interesting, where some of the students stopped, they filled out forms, they were engaging, and then some of the students act like, I would say the majority of the students that passed, they acted like they didn't even know. They were like, oh yeah, I registered to vote, or they would ignore you completely. So that was quite interesting. And it made me think about some of the issues that I've heard around what's happening with democracy and how people are feeling the disconnect in it. So I said, I wonder if that's why the young people didn't stop and engage as much as they could have or should have.
I think you always have seen that to a certain degree from young people. When you look at voting trends, it is mostly older people who vote. If you do get young people out at all, it's usually in a presidential race or something very highly publicized, but your reliable voters do tend to skew older. And I think a lot of young people have long felt disenfranchised and disconnected from the process.
Yeah, I agree. But I think now even more so, just because things are so polarized and things are just not even just in politics, just in society in general. Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of people who just don't feel like things are moving in a good direction, or there's going to be good outcomes.
Yeah, but you did see more engagement from 2017 on. I wonder if that's starting to reverse itself, because after Trump got into office, you were seeing more young people paying attention and voting, even in local elections, where that was really never a thing before. Pre-2017, I would look at who would show up, especially on local primary election days, really 65 and up might be the average age. Like it was really almost exclusively older people, and really younger people participated to a significant degree in local elections and more elections for the first time, I would say. That's certainly in my lifetime, as long as I've been observing it, post 2017. So I'm wondering if this is in some perverse way a sign that things are getting back to normal in the country and are improving. Even though, of course, we do want more people involved. It almost seems like it's the good old days again.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, you had those that were those that were engaging. They were very engaging, but then you had those. As a matter of fact, one of the women from the league she was there as well, and she said that a couple of the students stopped and told her they don't vote, and they went into this long dialogue with her as to why they didn't. She didn't share exactly what they said, but they gave her, it was quite a dialogue, she said.
You know what I've heard often, and someone said it to me again recently, that they don't vote because they think that their vote doesn't count because they live in New York, and New York is a blue state anyway, and so it doesn't matter what they do. And everyone's entitled to their own opinion and their belief and what have you. But I did have to clarify some things and say, listen, when it comes to local elections, especially, your vote does make a difference. We see elections sometimes being decided by like 15 votes, and you're talking about the balance of power in the state potentially being on the line by some of these elections.
And it's not even a lot of them.
You're right. It really does matter. And even if you want to talk about something like a presidential race or the governor's race or the mayor's race, and you think it's already decided, turnout also matters, and not just overall turnout, but turnout in your community. And so if you're like, well, the politicians, the elected officials, they don't care about my community. They're never here. How come they ignore us? Maybe, and this is, cynically speaking, but it's also reality. Maybe they're looking at the voter turnout and thinking that area doesn't matter because no one votes there anywhere. Not enough people vote there. Wouldn't it be great if everyone in the area voted? Because then they would have to start paying your area attention. And then when it came to directing resources and actually delivering, then they would have to step it up for your area because they know a lot of votes come out of there. And so I think it's a kind of a narrow-minded view to say, well, we already know who's going to win, so it's pointless to vote.
Right. And we actually saw that play out. Remember in 2012 when we did the congressional run, when you won one of the areas that the congressman had, and after that he opened an office there because he realized basically that he was weak in that area because he wasn't paying attention then.
That's right. We won Assembly District 23, which covers most of the Rockaways, and there was an office opened at Auburn by the Sea after that. And yeah, the congressman even made a comment around that time after losing the Rockaways. He said, I'm going to open up an office by Auburn by the Sea. Basically, I'm going to start paying attention to this area more.
Right. So, yeah, man. But at the same time, we got to also recognize that, the despair that people are feeling. I mean, it's real, like, not just in politics, but everything is going up, right? You got your expenses, cost of living, all of this is going ridiculously high. You've got all the partisan stuff you're seeing on television. You're seeing, even more so the rich getting richer and the poor struggling. And politicians are at the helm of everything at the point. So people can easily point to them and say, you're not doing your job. I thought you were supposed to be, in the mix on this.
That's very true.
But that confuses me a little bit because it seems like the sentiment is that no matter what they do, nothing is going to change. So people seem to think that their vote doesn't matter because whoever is in office is going to be the same. So can you have it both ways? I mean, you're saying that nothing ever changes, but you're also saying that the people in office are destroying everything. I mean, which one is it? I
think it's a mix of both. I mean, you get the people in office that get into office, and then, first, the way people run and make promises, everyone does it, but we all look at it and be like, oh, well, it's just politics, that's how it is. But the fact of the matter is, it's still every time they go in and they don't either come through with the promises or even attempt, which it's not always in their control to do so. That's another thing people need to understand. But at the same time, if half of their time is spent on worrying about reelection or what's going to get them reelected instead of putting their time towards the people they're supposed to be serving, then they're not going to be as effective as people need or they hope. And so, yeah, people are going to be disillusioned in what's happening.
And I agree, because I was listening to the news earlier, and this gentleman was saying, they're going to go up on a toll. The New York State Thruway is going up on their tolls. Now look at it. He's got a legitimate complaint. You have the tolls, then you have the taxes. Hey, look at the congestion pricing. When do people get a break?
Right.
Because some families are really, people are feeling this now. It's not like.
But all of these things, again, are being enacted by elected officials and by government officials, right? And so aren't we kind of just giving in by saying we're not going to vote at all? Wouldn't the wiser approach be we're going to start putting in officials who will be responsive to our needs? I mean, I guess people are just so disenfranchised at this point that they feel powerless, right? They think that would be nice, but it's never going to happen.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, a lot of the officials that are carrying this stuff out, you could look at it and say, well, they got in because people were kind of apathetic in their voting. And so the people who shouldn't have won got into power.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, you can also look at it and say, well, this constantly happens. That's just what politicians do. And so it's easy to look at it from both angles and just be disillusioned.
Yeah. But I also, I guess because I've spent some time on the inside of government, I always get annoyed when people talk about the government, or they, not even government, but they, as if it's one person pulling the strings on everything, right? And it seems like they lump in every government official, every billionaire, every landlord, everyone with any kind of power or authority or money or resources into this they, and act like it's one person controlling the whole world. And it's really not. Nothing is that monolithic. Even when you're in government, there are all kinds of people, different kinds of interests and agendas, and they're all fighting with each other oftentimes. That's why things move so slowly. There isn't one they. So when people start like lumping everyone together and saying, well, the politicians, they are all like this. There are so many different people. It misses all the nuance entirely.
That's true, but at the same time, I think there is generalities that can be applied to politicians and billionaires, corporate CEOs, corporations, and whatnot. There are generalities that we can look at that are similar across just the whole sphere. Like, for example, you can say they is not the one politician controlling the whole government. However, we are slowly having civil rights repealed. We're having cost of living is going up here and there. Politicians are making these votes about adding things like congestion pricing or MTA fees increasing that people just don't simply have anymore. And it just seems to constantly happen. Nothing's going down in general. And so I think when people say they're looking at more of an ideology than just that specific one person. Like, that's just what the institution seems to be like.
Right, but there are people fighting each other even within the institution on these points, and to say, well, they're doing it.
Sure.
This is the nuance of, well, there are actually people in there who are against it, maybe not enough right now, but the solution then is not to throw your hands up and say it can't be done. The solution would be to get more people in who agree with your viewpoint to fight back on it. When you say they're doing this, it almost seems like it's just predestined and everyone's on the same page, so it doesn't matter, whether it's 51-49 or 90-10, 99-1, there's no difference. They're just doing it, and so we're screwed no matter what. It's a defeatist attitude, I think, to talk that way.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But at the same time, when it's so much on the individual's shoulders, it's easy to see how they can get to a defeatist attitude.
Right. I see that, definitely.
So it's I mean, I get it, and I understand, more people participating can help. The idea is that more people participating will help curb that, right? Because supposedly the right people will get in, or
yeah.
But even that, it's like, is it the right people, or is it the person who ran the best campaign, right? Doesn't necessarily mean the most benevolent will get in. It just means the one who was able to navigate that campaign season the best. So
Right. But here's the thing though, you can
disillusioned.
navigate that campaign season the best with less benevolence, with fewer people in the mix, right?
Yeah.
Because now you're dealing more with institutions and you're dealing with the system more.
Right.
People are disenfranchised and so they're not weighing in. But people, enough people at least, do have a voice and they will drown out those influences. Now, sometimes it takes a lot, depending on how big those interests happen to be, right? But I always talk about this when we deal with any issue, when people say, well, there are people on one side of it with all the money. Yeah, that is a tough thing to overcome, certainly. But would you rather have, I don't know, $5,000 or 1 million people? I would rather have the 1 million people. So yeah, I mean, 1-to-1, I think money can easily drown out the person's voice, and that gets frustrating. But with enough people, right, I think the people do start to take precedence because they're the ones who are voting at the end of the day.
Right. No, I agree with that. And I think, ultimately, if the more people do participate, then there's a better chance at fighting those who are hell-bent on taking it down a path that our democracy doesn't need to go or shouldn't go. I mean, at the same time, we have to also look, like I said, what we've seen, not only just the general stereotype of government itself, but what we've seen in the past 20 years or so, right? Citizens United, we've seen
Right.
Voting Rights Act repealed, we've seen Roe v. Wade overturned. We've seen books being banned and burned, and we're seeing this recently in various states. We've seen affirmative action being repealed. Like, it's easy to get disillusioned.
Absolutely, but we've also seen progress, right? Gay
But
marriage
on
recognized
these,
as the law of the land as one. I mean, so there are setbacks and then there are advances, but to say that the answer is to just give up suggests to me we're saying that we want more setbacks and we're not going to fight for the advances anymore.
But
right?
some
No,
people are so disheartened. It's disheartening for some people.
right.
It's a
Absolutely.
tough fight. It seems like it's a tough fight too. So what do you do with that? How do you get them to
It's a
turn
tough
that
fight. No one
around?
said it was easy or supposed to be easy, right?
Sorry, say that again.
It's a tough fight, but who said it was supposed to be easy? I mean, anything worth fighting for is going to be tough.
Yeah,
Right,
it's
but how?
great. It's great ideology, but it's, and I believe in that as well. I agree with that as well. But the person that is busting their butt trying to provide for their family and all the stuff just keeps getting piled onto them.
Absolutely.
It's hard to sell that to them.
I empathize with that. It's just, I don't think the answer is to just give up. I mean,
No, I agree.
When people want to say, nothing ever changes, but they also want to say, but things are getting worse. How can nothing ever change by voting or by being involved in democracy? And also things are getting worse. I mean, it's a hypocritical argument to make, right? There isn't really logic in what they're saying.
Not really. When you could, if your mentality is that things as a rule always get worse, then
And
yeah,
also they don't ever change. If they're changing, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but if the stat quo is that they get worse and then it's still getting worse, then no, nothing's changing because it's continuing to be what it's doing.
It's continuing to get worse. So you're talking about the difference between velocity and acceleration, basically, right? It's not accelerating, it's staying at a constant negative velocity.
Right, it's constantly doing what it's always done, and that's get worse. So nothing changes in that
That's
regard.
one way to look at it. But I think when a lot of people talk about nothing ever changes, they're not talking about it like that. They're saying that basically their life isn't going to be any better or any worse, no matter who they vote for. And yet they're also going to say things are getting worse. Well, yeah,
Right.
but you just said you weren't going to vote and try to make it better. So what do you expect? It seems inherently contradictory.
I think
it depends on where you're looking at from what perspective, as Jay is saying. If I'm struggling, it's worse for me, and it's getting worse. There's no ease in my pain.
Right.
But if I'm at the top and I'm not struggling, hey, I'm good.
But if it's getting worse, then by definition, things are changing for you. Jay's point, it was always getting worse.
Right.
That aspect of it isn't changing, which is a fair point. But, a lot of people will say that it doesn't matter who is in office because nothing ever changes. But things clearly do change, right? We're seeing the results of certain people getting in office and making changes that we don't want to see. So we know that that's not true.
Yeah, I think when people say that, they're talking about nothing changes for the better. Nothing gets better generally from the government in their lives. And
I don't
we
know. I think I think that's a charitable interpretation of it. I think people saying it doesn't get better or worse. It just stays the way it is. Doesn't make any difference at all in our lives. That's how I read that.
Yeah, I
but
don't
Mike,
think
it
so. I think
depends on where you're sitting at in this, and when you're saying that, what level are you on when you say that?
right. I think that
Because
matters too.
I've heard both sides.
Yeah.
I've heard both sides of the story, and it depends on where you are sitting at.
Well,
in
here's
this
the thing,
argument.
and not to take a cheap shot, but I was thinking about this earlier. People have their agendas, right? And so you see in all of these threads on social media, any issue that's going on right now, it's almost inevitable somebody will say, this is what happens when you keep voting for Democrats. But
Sure.
if you look at who's saying it, these are people who are always Republicans for the most part, right? And they always had that anti-democratic agenda. And I guess here's me being a cynic. All right, let's say Eric Ulrich was mayor as a Republican. Would we be dealing with the same situation? Or, would everything that we're dealing with in the city be magically gone because we had a Republican in office? I mean, I don't think so, right? So, I think people have their own agendas that they bring to this, and they're just saying what they would have believed anyway. And I think that applies whether you're on that tip on, this is what happens when Democrats get elected. I think that applies when you believe that nothing ever changes and voting doesn't matter. It seems like no matter what happens, you're going to take your own viewpoint and your own agenda and your own perspective and apply it to the situation without really objectively analyzing the information.
I think people do that. Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of people look to either even debates or what they read or what they discuss to basically support their position originally.
Yeah.
Regardless of what it is, whether and just like you said, you see like Republicans on social media be like, this is what happens when you vote Democrat. I mean, I see the same thing from Democrats. This is what happens when you vote Republican. Like people just kind of what we tend to do or what we've done.
Right. And well, to me, it's especially transparent when they're saying that on topics that really have nothing to do with that. And,
sure.
And you can look at it like, okay, so if someone, just think it through, if someone from the opposite party was in office, do you think that would magically solve all these issues? Or,
Right.
we would still be dealing with them. And
right, it's
me being, I guess, a little cynical and saying nothing ever changes, right? But so I guess what I'm saying is there is a little bit of truth to that general idea or that frustration that people have. That it's not like a magic bullet that's going to solve all these issues.
Well, we used to remember when Obama was president, there was a kind of a running joke that kind of made fun of that same type of ideology, and it was the thanks Obama. So like anything that happened, it was like, thanks Obama. Bananas went up 10 cents, thanks Obama. Like it's that type of mentality, right?
People actually seriously, unironically will say that about Biden now.
Right, exactly. That's the point. It wasn't, but I think the running joke became that because people were actually saying that unironically about Obama as well. Yeah. And so it seems to be what we do. We look for a reason why the condition is that we're in is this condition. And we tend to go to our corners, so to speak, go to our tribes, so to speak, as our support system.
Right. And when conditions worsen, we become more tribal.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And we look to blame someone. In the chat, we think we got some folks in here in the chat coming up on this. Lixa, I think both parties need to find middle ground instead of being extreme to the left and to the right. Jennifer, you have to blame someone. I think we see that a lot. We have to blame someone. And so that's where that type of mentality comes from, even though sometimes not in every situation, there's someone to blame. I think we see that.
I know this is going to be crazy. We collectively might be to blame because this is our democracy that we're not sufficiently taking control of. And we're letting things like this happen. We're just saying, like Shiva said, I'm not going to vote because it doesn't matter. Yeah, okay. Now I think once you take that position, you have to burden a portion of the blame.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
And
yeah.
I think with that is true. And then it goes back to what we were talking earlier, and you look at the average everyday person that's working and trying to support themselves and their family, and they've got all this on their shoulders. They've got their taxes going up, they've got their, you know, charges going up, the tolls going up, you've got what they're seeing in the news, and then you put that on top of them, like, hey, you're also to blame and responsible for making sure these votes are getting done right. And it just seems so overwhelming, and they get easily disillusioned. I can see how that, you know, happens.
Yeah.
It's like so much.
Yeah.
So, but you know, I mean, that's kind of where we've always been. Like, if you've got a government of the people, by the people, for the people, which is what we're supposed to be having, then the people are supposed to have a hand in that, and that includes that responsibility to kind of look out for that.
Right. And again, we can't fall into the trap of assuming people are monolithic. The government isn't monolithic, and neither are the people. So you'll have many people who will agree with much of what's happening in government. And then you'll have people who are outside that bubble who don't agree with that at all. And they'll think, oh, look, the government isn't responsive to the people's needs. Not even seeing that there are plenty of people who agree with that. Congestion pricing, for example, right? There are people in communities that rely on cars who don't understand why anyone would support that. But then you go into areas where most people don't drive, and you do find a lot more support for it. But we're so segregated, and we're in our own bubbles, and we're so tribal and so polarized and all these things that we don't see it. So it's easy to look at these things as monoliths, because we are kind of keeping ourselves divided in kind of monolithic spaces. And so that, I think, feeds into the frustration, right? It's like, everyone here, all my friends, all my neighbors, all my family, we think that this thing is a horrible idea that the government is pushing. And so it's like, why are they ignoring the people, right? Not realizing that the government is a monolith and neither are the people.
Yeah. I think it reinforces that belief when, even if they push against it, it still goes into law. They still have to deal with it on.
You can't win every battle either, and some of the things are long-term fights.
But Mike, but you know, when you say that, when they're out there campaigning, do they give the impression that the government is that way?
What do you mean?
And you said monolithic.
Mm.
Who is
when
they?
they're out there campaigning, you know, the constituents. Well, once let's say a congressman or a state senator, when they're out there, they're out campaigning, what impression are they trying to make? What are they saying? Are they saying we can do this?
They're not monolith
I can
either.
do
They're
this.
saying little different things. That's my point. You can't say they're all doing the same thing. There is no they. There is no they. That's the bottom line. I'm preemptively giving the bottom line.
But my question is that how they present it? See what I'm saying?
No
is that how they present
you can't say
it?
they're all doing the same thing. Some people say one thing, some people say something else. Yeah, if they're trying to create the impression that the odds are stacked against us, then they might be talking like that and saying, you know, there's nothing that we could do to change anything. I don't think that's a very inspiring message for someone running for office to give, but there are people who do go in there and represent that. You know, they're not going to necessarily change anything, but they're going to be the dissenting voice. They're going to stand up for all the frustrated people and say, I'm also frustrated. And, you know, some people will go for that. So I think it's a calculation that people will have to make when they're running for office based on what they think the demographic of that area wants to hear.
Okay. That's true.
No?
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
I was waiting for Sheba to rebut, because that was your
Yeah, well, yeah, no, it's yeah. I see what he's saying. I understand that.
like, I think
It's
I
a
think
lot.
at the same point though, when you say there is no they, and I know honestly there is no specific they, but there is a they in the sense of the government, the politicians. And again, we said this is what we were saying earlier, what I was saying earlier, that there are certain generalities that are applied to those groups, that there are common threads that we can look to, and that can constitute a they when people are talking about they. I don't think it's completely, I don't know if I would say fair, but or true, but we can't completely say there is no they in this type of context.
Why can't we say there is no they?
Because there is, politicians, for example, can constitute a they, because what are they doing? They're going to be running for office. So they have specific interests to get in, to continue to hold their seat, to continue to get their donations flowing. They're going to do things that constitute a they because they all share similar ideologies to do
On
so.
some level, that applies to everyone. So that's like saying every person is a they because every person wants air. Every person wants to eat and drink.
Yeah,
But that's
we do say
that's why
that.
the word they exists. I'm not talking about
Right.
that, right?
Right. But we do that. It's the same and it'll be the same in politics or in business. We say CEOs, they do this. Well,
Right.
they're not all as they're all separate companies, but we know that CEOs are going to look out for their company. They're going to look out for their shareholders. They're going to look out for the profit. They're going to look out for their own compensation and maybe that of their board. They're going to be looking out for what's going to be best for creating more profit regardless for their company. Like we can look at
CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, there's CEOs of small companies, CEOs of nonprofits, like there are all kinds of CEOs. To lump everyone into a category and act like they're all the same is problematic. I mean,
but see, that's why I asked you the question. And do they present that we the people?
There
What
is
about
no
we
they.
the people?
Who is they? You have to be
We the
specific. You have to be specific.
that
Who is they? Who are you talking
That
about?
we is going to come into play.
Who is they? Who?
Yeah. That when you say the Congress, we the people, that they is going to filter into that somewhere. They are going to do this.
Right.
They are going to say that. They are going to.
So you're talking about. So okay. So you're talking about somebody, let's say, running for office and basically, or you maybe even in office and trying to not take any of the blame for what's happening, right? Because they're being outvoted, let's say, or maybe they're in a minority party right now. And so when they go back to their constituents, they're going to say, I'm fighting for X, Y, and Z, but they're doing this other thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Is that the way it's presented?
It can be.
Is that how they present it to the people?
In that particular scenario, if a particular representative is being outvoted, right?
But when they come together and when they all meet, does they come into play?
No, absolutely
when they come together.
Of course not. Then it's we.
Why not?
Because there is no they, it's
because
we.
I would look
They're
at
all
that.
trying to lobby each other at that point for getting their things passed. So what do you mean they? Who's they at that point? Someone in the sky? Who's they?
It's them.
To people sitting in Congress. They're going to say they're going to do something? No, we're going to do something.
And
right?
that goes, I think that goes to, I could be mistaken, but what Shiva was saying earlier about your point, where your point of view is, where you're looking at it from. Yeah, if you're in Congress, you're talking we, or when you say they, you're referring to the opposition. But if you're a citizen and you say they, Congress is one body. Doesn't matter who's, you're talking about what they're doing there, or you're talking about they as an opposing party from what you're looking at. So it depends on the point of view that you're talking from.
That's all fair. I'm saying when you reduce the entire conversation to they as if everyone in power is a monolith, then you're already losing the fight, right? Or you've already conceded the fight because there is no
something, Mike.
There's no pushing back. There's no trying to maneuver through that system when it's just this is they, right? So there are no cracks anymore. It's just a big solid block at this point.
Right. So that's how people look, when you see, I would say the grassroots people, some of the grassroots, I'm not going to generalize it, but I would say some of the grassroots people that are on the ground, they will say, oh, Congress, that's putting them all together. That's when that they will come in.
And that's fine to say, Congress is they because it's composed of multiple people. Right. I'm not objecting to that grammatically speaking, but I'm saying when you try to act like everyone who holds power, not just in Congress, not just in government, but even people who have money or resources or whatever, right? Any type of power or influence in society. When people lump them all together as if they're one unstoppable force of nature, then they're not able to even try to compete in any way, or even try to push back, or try to get their own interests represented. They're just giving up already, right? Because they're basically saying they're up against God, basically, right? This unstoppable force of nature that's this one they. And then, of course, when you have that mentality, why bother voting? They already decided what they're going to do, right? They already know. They know all. They know what I'm going to have for breakfast tomorrow.
Well, that's I mean, a lot of people feel that way. I mean, because
Yeah, that's true.
in their daily lives, it feels like it's just more keeps getting piled on. So in their daily lives, they're looking at, okay, well, when the Republican was president, or and that group was in power, you know, my taxes went up, my bills still increased, my rent still went up. When the Democrat was in, my taxes went up, the bills increased, my rent still went up. So for them, it's just like, yeah, what's the difference for the day-to-day things? Now we can look at larger points, and you're looking at, especially like on international relations, and we're looking at some of the bigger issues. Then yeah, we can see clearly, okay, there's certain agendas when certain groups are in power and certain things happen. But on people's day-to-day lives, what affects them directly, and we've talked about before, like it's generally tends to be the local politicians that affect their lives more directly. But when they're looking at, you know, these big things, like, oh, what does it matter if you know the donkey or the elephant is in? Like for my day-to-day life, it's still tough.
But then you're going to turn around and not vote because you think that your vote doesn't count. And yet in a local election,
Right.
sometimes it's often, you know, it could be very close.
Right.
And we're acknowledging that these local elections determine what happens in our day-to-day lives the most, right? So people saying nothing, you know, my vote doesn't matter, so I'm not going to vote. Yet they actually could influence a local election, which would make a difference in their lives.
Sure.
But
I think
some people don't look at it like that, though. So you'd be surprised at the people.
Need more
Some of the
education, better
people-
education. This is
Right,
why
exactly.
when we go to high schools, right? Civic education, teach about government. When I was in high school, what did we learn about? The president, Congress, maybe the Supreme Court, and wars, right? We didn't learn anything about what local government did. We didn't know that there was a local government. They never mentioned the word assembly or state senate once.
City council.
Never once.
No.
City council, forget about it. Community board, are you kidding me? Never. We would have no idea such a thing existed.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right. No, absolutely. I think, you know, we have to acknowledge that the position that the average citizen is in at the same time, and what they're going through and what can be seen through their eyes potentially, with also educating people on that, you know, local government plays a very important role, and that you can have some sort of a say in what happens by participating in that or paying attention into that. So I think both have to be, you know, looked at. Oh, we're having a lot of folks in the comments that are actually getting it on board in this topic as well. I think Jennifer goes to your point. Not one single person is to blame. The real problem is we're divided, and the real issue will never change until we all come together. There was a rebuttal to that. Unfortunately, people pay attention to either the Democrat or Republican candidate. If we truly want our voices heard, we need to start considering a third party candidate that will align with what we want and start term limits.
There is no we. No, to continue my point about there is no they, there's also no we. The problem is that we're so divided, but yes, we do need to try to find ways to come together.
Yeah, so term limits seem to be what people are agreeing on in the chat, and just saying the whole system needs a renovation. Both sides are outdated.
Okay, but at least look, these are tangible ideas that people are suggesting, right? That is a better approach for my money than saying they already decided what's going to happen and we can't change anything. Nothing ever changes. I'm not going to vote. I'm going to stay home. At least they're saying something in the chat, right? They're saying something needs to be done, and these are some things that we could look into doing. Now, I understand people are going to say, yeah, term limits on all levels of government might be very difficult to do, but at least they're proposing it and they're saying this is something that we could strive for. And I think that's what we need to keep in mind, right? That we're going to get frustrated. It's inevitable. We're all frustrated, right? Some more than others. But as long as we're striving for something, as long as we are fighting to make things better, like Jay has talked about, it's a more perfect union. It's never going to be perfect, right? Then we're on the right path. As difficult as that can be, and as disheartened as many of us are along this journey.
Right. Yeah, there's, I mean, I'm of the mind that, you know, the people together, the people united, have the ability to move the needle.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
it's easy to understand, and we also have to acknowledge that people are disillusioned with that and don't necessarily believe in that. And it's easy to understand and acknowledge why they don't believe in that. And I think that's where we need to maybe set the first not the first focus, but one of the focuses as far as getting that message out and getting it around, that, you know, we can acknowledge why you don't believe that this is possible. So.
Right. Well, one of the things I think we need to fight to do, strive to do, is reduce the polarization that we see. And we've talked about how social media has played a role in that, right? It's debatable how big a role, how small a role, but it's certainly part of that discussion. And speaking of social media, it seems like Twitter, X, is going to start charging people. Is that going to be more polarized, less polarized? I mean, what is that going to do?
I think, right. So recently on a call, Elon Musk, who is the owner of Twitter now, has did a call or interview with Benjamin Netanyahu, who was, I don't know if he's still PM Prime Minister of Israel, or he is now, because I know he's been back and forth in different positions.
Yeah. He's in, he's out, he's in. Yeah.
Yeah, he's in it, but I think
World leader in any sense. And in that call, he said that Elon Musk said that he's going to, you know, have to charging, or alluded to that they was going to move to a subscription model. Now they already have a premium subscriber model that he instituted, I think it was earlier this year, and it's $8 for the premium subscriber model, which gives you the blue verified check, and you get a few more, you know, I guess perks, so to speak. But so this would be less than that $8 a month, and he hasn't specified how much, but he's saying that they're going to move to a small monthly payment for users of the X systems. What do you?
Well, first of all, here is my beef with Twitter right now. I've been posting up, this really drives me crazy. I've been posting up small clips from the Queens Link City Hall rally, and they've been on my stories to show people highlights from the event. And what I would do is I would take a little, you know, 30-second to 1 minute video and put it on Twitter as well, right? Now, I believe Twitter defaults to 45 seconds or up to 45 seconds for a video. Then it wants you to pick where if you upload, let's say, a minute video, it comes in and wants you to pick which 45 seconds you want or whatever. But the bottom line on that is, it seems like no matter what you do, when you post a video to Twitter, it dislodges the visual from the audio at some point in the video. And I don't understand why they can't get this algorithm correct. Now, I was Googling it. There are workarounds, like you can watch to see when it happens, and then you're trying to make those conversations yourself. So you can make a Twitter version of the video where the audio and the video doesn't match, in order to so that when Twitter screws it up, it'll screw it up onto the right place accidentally. That's ridiculous to make people have to do such a thing. Why the hell is Twitter not able to process a video and not make it look like the mouths are moving like this and the words come out a second or two later?
Because they're working off of a skeleton crew right now. When Musk took over, he fired 7,500 people, got rid of a bunch of departments, dissolved the board, took it private, and he's basically running off a skeleton crew. And that's why a lot of things aren't getting dealt with. A lot of the monetization of certain things aren't being taken care of. That's why rollouts or updates to certain features aren't being dealt with because they don't have a lot of people there. Now that point that you're making also happens in other places. I've seen it in Instagram, especially if a video loops a couple of times, sometimes the audio gets off for some reason.
For these clips,
That's an engineer has to get in there. Some engineers have to get in there and do something.
they've been fine on Instagram and fine on Facebook, but on Twitter, every single one of them at a certain point in the video. It's weird because it's not immediate. So it wouldn't even be an easy fix where you keep like, okay, I'm just going to delay it by a couple frames because it's not constant, right? So it might be good for the first 15, 20 seconds, and all of a sudden it's getting increasingly worse.
Right, it's happening in the processing. Once you upload it, their computers process it, and what they do is that they're going to take it from the level that you've got it, because you probably send it in and said, let's say, for example, at a 5 megabyte file, and they're going to try to process it down. YouTube does the same thing, process it down to something that's much smaller so it can be delivered faster for different devices and over different networks. So it's happening in that process. So whatever algorithm is running there is screwing something up.
But you would think for a social media site like that, that would be a priority to fix. And this isn't a new thing. The same thing happened when I was uploading videos for the Queens Link rally on the boardwalk in October of last year. So almost a year ago, it was happening, probably even before then. I don't know why they haven't fixed it in all this time. And now they want me to pay.
So let me ask you, would that preclude you from, exclude you from paying for your Twitter usage? When
it would exclude me, it would exclude we, and it would exclude they.
So I think a lot of people are going to leave Twitter in that case. And we've talked about
it would exclude me.
Yeah, I mean,
in this case, there is a they, Jay.
I think the bigger issue here is not just that. I mean, Twitter is a private company now, and he can do what he wants to do with it. The problem is that, and we talked about this a long time ago before, that Twitter had become kind of the de facto modern public square, and that a private person can come in and take that over and just change the direction of it is going to be felt. It's not going to be something that's going to be readily resolved, because so many places utilize this new public square, or this town hall, or whatever, I forget what the terminology was, but public square. Even to the point that earlier this year, the New York City, town square, the New York City government said that we're no longer going to be posting updates on Twitter because it has become an unreliable venue to disseminate information, and that was after Musk's rollout. So
to be fair, to be fair, it isn't only Twitter, it's all of social media that's thought of as the new town square. So we don't need it to be Twitter. It could be other platforms as well.
Yeah, but Twitter is very different than
is
other
AI,
Sorry?
Is AI coming into play now? Is it coming more to the forefront as to why you're having that issue?
No, with this,
Mike?
this is Musk. This is completely Musk. So Musk
I think she's asking, Sheba, you asking about the issue I brought up about the videos not syncing properly?
Right. Do they have, where is AI in all of this? Because I've been getting in all of this social media, social media. Where does AI fit in all of this? I've gotten on, as a matter of fact, I got on Twitter and they said, oh, AI can help you do this and make it better for you and blah, 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 blah.
I know. Actually, I know what you're talking about on LinkedIn. When you go to make a post now, it's like, let AI draft the post for you.
So is AI driving that on Twitter?
No, AI could be utilized as a tool to make your posts, maybe to optimize, so to speak, or that's kind of the theory, that you'd be able to optimize your post. But in as far as running of Twitter, or the environment that's going on and what's prompting these changes, this is more of Musk and his megalomania, in my opinion. And he has a history of doing this. Well, he has a history of doing this. He's done this in his other companies as well. But the problem is here is the importance of what Twitter was to just society and discourse. And he's, he overpaid. He talked stuff. He came out, he had to pay like 45 billion to buy Twitter. And then he found out it wasn't worth it and he couldn't back out of it. And so he ended up having it. But now I think another larger point is he's turning it into a conservative and kind of a hate speech type of bastion on a place, and cutting features and making people try to pay for it so he can make his money back. Because as soon as he bought in, advertisers ditched. They left the platform because hate speech increased on there. His personal views and the things he was saying, the things he was doing, like, you know, he would fire people that disagreed with him or said something that he didn't like. And he's done that, and he did that in his Tesla stuff too, like in the new truck and whatnot. Some guy criticized him on Twitter, so he went in and canceled their order for the new upcoming truck, right? Personal vendettas.
You said that Twitter was different when it comes to a social media platform.
Yeah.
As it relates to the new town hall idea, right? Why is it different?
I say it's different than other social media platforms. Yeah, because Twitter's main focus was discourse. Instagram was images, right? Facebook was more sharing between family and friends, because you had a limited connection account that you could get into, right? What YouTube was video sharing and film creation, telling those stories. Twitter was discourse.
And LinkedIn is for professional contacts.
Right. And Twitter was discourse, telling, disseminating information, news. I mean, news broke there first, you know, before anywhere else.
The thing about that, though, is it's also, I think, as we've discussed previously, an inherently polarizing platform, because it didn't give you a lot of characters. And I guess you could pay for more characters now, right? But that was the whole idea of Twitter, that you had to make your point quick and get out. And that doesn't incentivize nuanced discussion or a whole lot of compassionate discussion, right? That's basically screw you, no screw you. And that's been a big problem with it.
Right. But I don't think there was a real problem with it before Musk came in that regard.
Really? When did Musk come in?
In the past year?
Last year, wasn't it?
You're saying Twitter only became a problem as far as the extreme polarization in the past year?
No, I'm not talking. I'm talking about as far as the platform itself. What people do with it is something that's going to be a little bit different. But
I'm talking about inherently, though. I'm talking about really from the beginning of Twitter inherently, because you said that it was designed for discourse, and I agree with that sentiment. But I think the other side to that is that it's inherently a polarizing platform, because it doesn't give you a lot of time and space to develop your argument. That's not what it's for. It's not for well thought out, well reasoned, developed arguments. It's for people basically yelling at each other to, you know, to be a little simplistic.
No, it's not for people yelling. It's for quick updates. It's for quick stuff. It evolved into people using it for longer discussion. Like if you're looking for a longer thought out, that was blog platforms. That was WordPress, that was Tumblr. Well, not really Tumblr, but blog type of platforms. This was called mini blogging, and it was for people to put, you know, it wasn't necessarily for that, but people started communicating, people started reaching out, having these discussions. And
the whole idea of what was 140 characters or less, and they keep changing.
Originally it was 140,
that whole idea, that whole premise does not encourage much discussion, right? Much debate, much nuance. That's really for sound bites. That's whether that was the intent or not. That's what you're going to get with that kind of platform.
And you would get some people are going to, people would use it that way. Not everyone uses it that way, but some people will. But by and large,
it's any secret that Twitter is home to more extremists than other platforms.
I would probably agree with that. Outside of Reddit, but I'd probably agree.
Right. Well, Reddit probably agree with subreddits and different communities too. I mean, Twitter, you'll find some of that too. But I guess looking at on the whole here, I do think on the whole. Well, what about Reddit? I mean, Reddit is a good one. Reddit's for discussion, isn't it?
Reddit's a different type of discussion, though. You can do these longer posts and things like that. Twitter was a micro blog platform,
and it was less inherently polarizing.
Wasn't Twitter something that kept it short and sweet? Because I haven't seen people go over. That's what I always took Twitter for. You know, you keep it short and sweet and you move on.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying, I mean, we talked about this, it's short and sweet, but the extreme voices then get echoed the most. It doesn't really leave you a lot of room to say, well, there's some of this and there's some of that, and here are my
Right.
to back it
Yeah.
up. And it doesn't really give you like a lot of space to give
Yeah,
a very
'cause you get-
well-reasoned, well thought out argument. It's just really more for saying, this is what it is, like it or not.
Right.
And
Yeah.
people will retweet it, repost it, and then it basically does devolve into just people shouting back and forth.
Well, I
That's
think
true. I've seen that.
that's more of usage instead of what the platform was
Yeah, but the
designed for.
idea of it's got to be a very limited number of characters. I think that lends itself to that effect. Can't really divorce the two.
I think you can, because not everybody uses it that way.
Not everybody, but more people do. We talked
There's
about
no we, there's no they, Mike.
right, but you could look at trends. You can look at trends.
You
Right?
can, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and you can look at what's happening on Twitter as compared to other platforms.
You can. Like again, it was people use the different platforms in different ways because of whatever their platform's main product was.
Limitations, right, of the platform.
Limitations, main product, all
Features
of
of the
that.
platform. Right.
Right.
And that's my point. And also we talked about the algorithms, right?
The algorithms is a problem.
Incentivizing more extreme type
Right.
rhetoric.
Now that is a different story. I would divorce the algorithm, the rise of algorithms from the platforms themselves, because all of the platforms have them. Wait. I say that because all the platforms have algorithms that do the exact same thing. They all try to reinforce whatever it is that you're seeing over, because their idea is that this will increase engagement. Oh, you saw this, you read this, you like this. Here, have everything else that we've got to offer that, because now you're going to want even more of it. And that's something that shared all platforms have instituted.
Sure. But the algorithms are pushing.
That wasn't original.
No, I know. But the algorithms that are so the algorithms push posts and content that's likely to get more engagement to the front, right? And the ones that aren't to the back. And so they're looking at what's getting the most echoes on Twitter already, what's getting the most retweets and engagement and comments and that kind of thing. And that's already more extremist type content, generally speaking, because the platform itself, even pre-algorithm, incentivizes that type of content. And so the algorithm is only really reinforcing what the platform is already doing.
So are you saying that Elon Musk took?
I'm sorry.
Did Elon Musk take this over for that purpose, to control all of that?
I think part of it was for him to control the world discourse in the way that he wanted to do it. Because he could have if he wanted a platform just to have a free speech platform, like he says, he could have bought True Social. That was up for sale. I mean, at one point Kanye was going to buy it, right? That was up for sale, and that bills itself as a free speech platform. He could have had one built. He wanted this one because, one, it was the biggest. It was the one that had the most importance to it as far as goes to worldwide and global discourse. One that he could put his face in front of because he's, an egotistical narcissist like that. And so he's changing it into a platform that's probably a little bit more like a True Social, because what happened was when he came back in, he's like, okay, free speech. I'm all for this free speech. Let's reinstate these accounts. Let's reinstate these accounts of people who were previously kicked out for not following standards of, not disseminating hate speech, not disseminating dangerous propaganda. And let's put them back in, and then everything increased. And that's what got him into trouble with various organizations like the ADL. He's actually supposedly suing the ADL because he's saying that they're the reason why his the revenue dropped on Twitter, because they're putting pressure. Organizations like that are putting pressure on brands to stay away from his platform because of there's too much free speech. And so you
don't think though that part of that was a financial strategy on his behalf? He thought controversy sells, essentially, and he thought putting more of these accounts back is gonna incentivize more engagement, whether it's good or bad or whatever. It's just gonna get more people talking, and that's gonna drive up traffic, and that's gonna be a positive financial incentive for him.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so, because I think he's on that side of that same right-wing type of ideology that tries to mask saying whatever you want as free speech. And maybe, I don't know if you would call that a libertarian type of view or conservative or whatever you would
Oh,
call
but hold
it.
on a second, but also isn't it kind of phony because
It's phony.
he doesn't really support free speech
He
because
does.
he'll punish people who say things that he disagrees with.
Absolutely. And he's got a track record of doing so. And he uses it to his own thrills and his own benefit. I mean, even before he bought Twitter, we saw what he did with Twitter when he manipulated the cryptocurrency market to his own benefit. So he would go in.
But you don't think any of this is an attempt to make money on his behalf?
I think part of it is money, but also
Yeah.
part of it is just because he can, like he believes he has the right to. I mean, and part of that is what has made him probably successful because, you know, he's got his space company, he's got all of this stuff. So, I mean,
But we're saying essentially this whole conversation can be broken down into he wants to be they.
he wants to be they, basically. He wants to
Yeah.
be they,
This is
and
gender
he's
way.
accomplished it. He's accomplished it by being
Yeah.
able to buy Twitter, taking it public, firing all the board and all the previous people in
Mhm.
there, changing who's in there, and you know, now I think he is in a he's got to make money, right? He's already spent $44 billion on this platform, and it didn't go probably the way he expected it to, because half of all his advertisers bounced as soon as he bought it. And the public sentiment is not with him on it. I think for most people, saying this name change and whatnot is not very much of a good move business wise, but I think he's looking to build something bigger, but also looking to control the conversation. He wants Twitter, or X now, to be this massive platform that controls like your finance exchange or whatever other things he wants to put in there. But I don't think it's going to get there if you change it to a subscription only model.
Right.
The people that made Twitter are going to leave. There's only going to be a small group that's going to be there. That's not going to make up the amount of money that Twitter was making through advertising. They did 750 million in 2022 before he bought it. Half of those advertisers left. He instituted the subscription for Twitter Blue. That's only probably brought in about 5 million in revenue. He's still a far cry from what Twitter was doing when Twitter was, even though it wasn't a perfect platform, than what it was before he came in and did all of the stuff he's doing.
Right. So
Yeah.
do you think the world would be a better place or a worse place, or would there be no change without Twitter?
I think it personally, I think it would be a little worse in some ways and maybe a little better in other ways. But there are still other platforms that people can migrate to. There's going to be a little bit of a difference in how they utilize those platforms. It's not a discourse-based platform. Like anytime, you know, with Twitter specifically, anytime something was happening or going to happen, I would go to Twitter first, because they would get the information would be disseminated there much faster than news outlets and journalists could do it, because they've got to write a story, they got to go through the editing. Now it can be mistake stuff, but if you're putting up videos and this and that, you can get the up to the minute. Remember when the protests were happening? We're
put up
talking
videos that the audio doesn't match the picture.
that are out of sync. But you know, I mean, we saw in real time things like the Arab Spring play out on Twitter. We
Right.
saw Occupy
Even
Wall.
when
we saw-
Osama bin Laden was being killed, right? You had a guy tweet from that area,
Right.
right? Saying what's going on with
School
helicopters above and everything.
Right, school shootings, immediately it gets to Twitter. Students are able to say that right away, and people can spread that information immediately than it would get if it went to the news. So I think we'll be a little bit worse in that way. Some of the way Twitter's used might be a little bit better served not being around, but I
I
think,
mean, right. Then you have platforms like Threads, which might benefit from it.
yeah, I think they're moving too slowly in their rollout. They're going to miss their chance, I think, to be what Twitter was.
Well, possibly, but there still needs to be a platform for people to migrate to.
I agree. People are trying to. They're
that subscription-based model.
right. There are other platforms that people are trying to replace their Twitter affiliation with. There's like what is it? Well, there's Threads. Then there's what is it? Bluehost, and there's a couple of other ones, but
All right, so we've got we're running late. Let's get the poll question out. And I think we wanted to briefly go over our poll results from last week.
Yes.
Okay. So the poll question of the week is, would you pay to use Twitter?
Yeah. I say no, I'm not paying to use.
No,
I would
not at
not either.
all.
I barely use it. I mean, I've got an account and I'll post things up on it.
Mhm.
But nah, it's not worth paying for, in my opinion.
Right. I think some things have definitely gotten worse. Algorithms have messed up engagement to a lot of degree. But anyway, well, let's get into the poll from last week.
Yeah.
And we're seeing in the chat, no is definitely saying there. Why is Lixa jinxing me? And that's just not very nice.
She's
Jinx
jinxing you?
Yeah, she said jinx and then put my name next to me. That's just not cool. So anyway, let's get to
Coca-Cola. Is that what that means?
huh?
Doesn't that mean you owe her Coca-Cola now?
I have no idea. Speaking
Wasn't
of
that what it
Coca-Cola,
was? I don't know. Jinx.
speaking of Coca-Cola, real quick. When's the last time you guys saw a Coca-Cola in a bottle, like the bottle with the metal cap?
Oh, man.
It was at a restaurant
That's
in the
been a
city, but
while.
it was Mexican Coke.
Well, right in the States.
Yeah. I'm saying in New York City,
Yeah.
they sold Mexican Coca-Cola.
Yeah. Because I was at a restaurant here a couple of days ago, and it was on the bottle on the shelf. They had, or in the refrigerator, they were pulling out, bottles of Coke. This was in the glass bottle, the old one with like the I don't know how whatever that shape is, and
Coke
whatnot.
bottle
And,
shape.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so the Coke bottle. I mean, basically.
Yeah.
And my friend was like, I'm like, wow, that's it's been a long time since seeing that. And my friend's like, oh, that's just normal. Like, not in the States. Not in the States. They don't really sell those anymore. I
Yeah, they
remember when
moved away from glass as the norm a while ago. It became plastic.
right. Well, not for cola. You mean aluminum?
So for like the 2 liters, because those.
Those. I'm not talking about two. I'm talking about the
No, I know.
individual. Yeah.
Right, but I'm saying it used to all be glass, and then they
Right.
moved to plastic and in the cans. Yeah.
All right, so the poll, let's get to the poll. Last week's poll was, can you be pro-immigrant while also acknowledging there is a resource problem? And this was prompted by what was going on in the news with Mayor Eric Adams talking about the issues that New York City is facing with this influx of so many migrants at such a short amount of time, and not being able to properly deal with the situation. And so we put the poll out, and what did you expect that the results would be here? We figured that
I
it
think,
was possible, not possible.
no, I expected people to say yes. The majority of people say it is possible.
All right, well, they are with you. 90% said yes, 10% said no, it's not possible. But 90% said yes. Some criticized the way that it was
The premise of the
question
question,
put
the
out.
phrasing of the question, right? And
Right.
you expect people to say it's possible, but then there might be some disagreement as to where to draw the line, I guess.
Right. Well, one comment said there are plenty of good data that show that over time, immigrants create employment and economic activity at higher rates than US-born people. However, in the short term, massive influxes of immigrants can cause economic and resource strains. More than one thing can be true at a time. I understand what they're saying, but I think they're kind of missing the point of this situation here, of what's happening right now. I mean, some of those things could be true, but when we've got migrants that are sleeping on the street, because there's just lack of resources or places to put them. I don't think this has anything to do with their future employment and economic creation activity. This means what's happening right now in this situation.
Right. And there's also a difficulty in terms of allowing them to work and their efforts to try to change the law to make it easier for them to get work permits and work, because there is that philosophy that's out there that not everyone agrees with, but that migrants will be less of a burden on the system if they're contributing to the economy and working legally, right? Because if they're not, then the ones who are here are going to rely on assistance from the government, which obviously puts a further strain on our resources.
Right. And one point on that, the work permits, migrants are allowed to get them, but it takes time. And so they're looking to rush that basically so they could start looking for work immediately.
Right, but isn't it also temporary and limited also?
It might be. It
I
might
think
be.
it is, yeah. It might, yeah.
But I think even if, let's say, okay, I mean, okay, they're allowed to work, they're allowed to look for work. What does that do with the immediate need if people are sleeping on the street? I mean, there still needs to be housing help. There still needs to be
Mhm.
opportunity help. There needs to be just more than one way
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I think the theory, though, is that if you get more people working, ultimately they'll be able to afford these things themselves.
Yeah, I
But they're
mean,
making a nice salary too. You have to look at the salary that they're making as well.
There is no they.
Yeah.
Who's they? Who's making the salary, Shiva?
Oh, I mean, the migrants, the salary that they will be making.
You mean they
it
will be
depends on
making? They're
what
all getting
job
the
they
same
have.
job?
Yeah, their jobs, you get a job, but so you get a job, you could be making $8 an hour. What are you going to do with that? And $15 an hour, what are you going to do with that
I
in New
thought you
York
were
City?
saying that all the migrants were getting the same job.
No,
Okay.
no, I'm just saying in terms of the salary on those when they're saying, oh, they can go in and sustain themselves through jobs.
Yeah,
But I agree with getting a
that's a
job,
very valid point,
but
Shiva.
is it? Hmm?
Yeah. No, it's a very valid point because, and I see people making this as well. When the question comes up, they're saying, okay, it sounds good in theory or on paper, I
Right.
guess, to allow people to get jobs. But like Sheba asks, what kind of jobs are people going to be getting? And is it really going to alleviate the burden on our tax base? Because they're still going to be highly subsidized because most people are not going to be at the entry level making enough money to support themselves.
Right.
Right. And yeah, and then there's going to be the language barrier that's going to be
Absolutely.
limiting their opportunities they
Prospects.
have as
Yeah,
far as
definitely,
yeah.
definitely.
So
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure any little bit helps, and it also being able to work and receive your own money, however small, would also be something for the migrants themselves, because a lot of people, they want to contribute to their own livelihood, and would prefer not to just sit and get this this help, so to speak. But I think just talking about them getting the ability to work right now is is a small part of a bigger issue, and I think, what was it, some people, even some New Yorkers, and had mentioned, this could also be an issue with people that are living here that are competing for these jobs as well.
Mhm.
And then, what do we do about that as well?
Right. Have you looked in Indeed? I've looked on Indeed, and 50 plus applicants have gone for one position.
Oh, that's
50
small.
plus.
There'd be like 100, it'd be like
Ye-
150,
But when they,
200.
yeah, but when I say 50 plus, that means they're not going to even mention the number. They just say 50 plus. So you can
They're not even
imagine.
looking at those. They're not even looking at those. That's another big problem, is they're using these ATS systems, right? That are automatically scanning resumes for keywords to put certain candidates into a smaller pile for a human to actually look at. So most people are getting eliminated by a computer system before they even get to the point. So I think it's a big problem, though. People are the more immigrants keep coming in, New York has a limited amount of resources. That's just a simple fact. Our poll was asking, because Mayor Adams was getting criticized from the left that he's anti-immigrant. Some were calling him Black Trump because they're saying that he's using the same talking points as Trump, or something similar. Like, is there no nuance in that
Right.
discussion?
But you know what's interesting? So I just saw a video of public advocate Jumaane Williams speaking on this, and he was critical of the mayor for the way the mayor has been talking about this. But if you listen to what he's saying, he's kind of saying the same thing as the mayor. He's saying we have to be mindful of the problem that it poses for New Yorkers who have been here, while also being compassionate. I think maybe the gripe is with language that is considered alarmist by some, like saying people are going to destroy New York City. I think maybe that's really what upsets people about it. But if you're really breaking it down into what the mayor is really trying to get at, I think he's basically saying the same thing, that it's not a knock on immigrants, it's not being anti-immigrant or anti-migrant or anti-asylum seeker. He, in fact, the mayor has appeared at events saying we need to be compassionate and show compassion to everyone seeking help, right? But we also can't ignore the reality that we're in, that resources are limited and that people can suffer as a result of something like every agency having to be cut, all services having to be cut. I mean, that is a disastrous situation for everyone. And so, you know, I don't really know that someone like Jumaane Williams and someone like Eric Adams are really saying things that are much different. Maybe it's just the words that are being used or some of the language, some of the rhetoric, you know, I don't know. But I think everyone is kind of saying the same thing on this.
Mhm.
Well, not everyone.
Not everyone. I
I
think
shouldn't
I mean,
generalize.
but, you know,
But it's just interesting
Yeah.
to me how Jumaane Williams, the public advocate, has represented that political left in New York City, and he's not really deviating too far from the mayor, even though he is criticizing him.
I think
Mhm.
what was the quote that Adams said about, I think it was our compassion is maybe limited, but our resources are not, or something in that regard.
Mhm.
And I think that's the point where really the crux of it. I mean, we can have all of the compassion and empathy in the world, but that still is going to come up against a budget at some point, unfortunately.
Sure.
And it's not even for, you know, we're looking at bringing people in, and then you still got people that are already here, citizens that are in the city that were already feeling the crunch before this. And so now it's going to be an added burden on all resources. And not saying it's not one to take, it's saying that we have to be realistic about maybe how
Right.
much the system can handle. Because
Exactly.
even if you take in everybody, and then now you've got migrants on the street, I mean, are you really helping them to the level that you may have promised as being a sanctuary city, right? If people are now living on the street as opposed to whatever their condition was before, we've got to be able to provide those services
Right.
and understand there's a budget. And this is, I think, what he was asking for. Like, let's get some help from the rest of the state. There is plenty of space in the state, but I think the
Right.
governor
And we have to be mindful. I mean, some people only come in with this attitude of just don't let anyone in. Okay,
Right.
the laws are what they are, the process is what it is. So in the meantime, if we're not at that level, let's say that that's the level even the mayor would want, hypothetically speaking, let's say that that was true. That still doesn't deal with the reality of the situation on the ground and having to do something based on the spot that we find ourselves in now, right?
Right. And then now even the Biden administration is piling on the same train, putting some criticism against Mayor Adams. They're shifting blame to Adams for saying that he didn't have any exit strategy.
Everyone is doing this.
Yeah.
Huh?
Everyone is doing this, right?
Right.
That's what they're
But
doing.
it's like I get that, saying, okay, you had no exit strategy, but 100,000, over 100,000 in a year is a pretty significant number. Like, I think that would overrun. I'm sorry.
And then,
What
they
was
had an issue
Adams'
with home.
entrance strategy, according to Biden?
I didn't see what there was an entrance strategy.
Like
But you know what,
the
Mike,
mayor
and
decided
Jay,
New
I
York to
understand.
be a sanctuary city, or just like the
Right.
mayor was involved in the consent decree that happened in 1981 that said under the New York State Constitution, we have to take care of people who are here. That
But you know,
was the Adams thing.
right, but you know something? They did not solve the homelessness problem. The homelessness down in the city, they hadn't solved that problem. So why would you take on people that have to go into those shelters when you haven't solved the original problem? Because the last I heard, and I could be wrong, and I quote, they had so many children. This is before the migrants arrived. They had so many families with children that they could fill Yankee Stadium and overflow. That issue wasn't taken care of. So
Mhm.
why would why would he
But you have to
say
realize,
that-
Sheba, other states were sending people to New York City and New York State because they knew that New York couldn't turn them away by law. And this is, again,
Right, this is true.
1981. So take the migrants out. I mean, you're talking about homeless people, American citizens were being
No,
sent
but I'm just
plane
saying,
tickets and sent to New York because they knew New York couldn't turn them away.
right, but I'm just saying there was an issue already there that, you know, I understand the sanctuary city, but there was an issue that was already not being handled properly. Now you have migrants that have come here and they're homeless. They're on the street.
I see what you're saying. Like you've already got a significant homeless population and homeless issue in the city. Why do you think that you would be able to be a sanctuary city and take all
Exactly.
newcomers when you already can't deal with who's already here?
But again, we have to be careful when we talk about sanctuary city, right? That didn't mean we take everyone. What it meant was, so it kind of went through a few different iterations over time, right? I believe Mayor Koch was the first person to make that policy, but it really came up again under the de Blasio administration when Trump was the president. And what it really meant at that time was we weren't going to allow ICE and the federal authorities that were under Trump's purview to come into schools and come into our city. So our local authorities, right, the NYPD, our local police officers, we're not going to cooperate with Trump's goons as they came in to try to tear kids away from their families and put them in cages at the border. That's what it meant when I said New York was a sanctuary city. It didn't mean bring on every migrant. And that's a different conversation that we're having now, right?
Right. Well, they took advantage of that. They took advantage of that. And they said, oh, well.
All that, and also the consent decree from 1981 that said that New York has to provide care for anyone who's homeless.
Right. There's a question in the chat asking, could Adams turn away the migrants as a sanctuary state? Well, the state isn't a sanctuary state. It's a city. It's New York City, if I'm not mistaken.
New York City.
New York City is a sanctuary city.
New York City, the state is not.
And Adams has no control over the state. He's just the mayor of New York City.
No.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, no, the problem is that you really can't stop them. As of now, right? There are attempts being made to try to change the law and change the policy, but given the way the system is currently set up, our hands are pretty much tied.
In this chat, this is saying, but New York was already a sanctuary state. All of New York State has been since 2017. The state is. I'm unaware of that. If so,
how you're defining sanctuary states. So the problem is that people use this phrase sanctuary as a political football to say, basically people on the right use it to say, you know, look at what you're doing. You're destroying America by being the sanctuary. You have to actually be specific about what policy you're referring to, right? Like I said, there was a consent decree going back to 1981 talking about New York having to take care of its homeless population and not having the ability to turn people away if they come in.
State or city?
That was state. That was New York. That was, but and then like I said, Mayor Koch said we were a sanctuary city under de Blasio, sanctuary city, and that was about ICE and the federal government not coming in and taking kids out of schools. And so these are different policies that we have, right? Some are policies of the city, some are interpretations of the state constitution that have been ruled on by courts. And so there are different policies in place, but it isn't like people use it like as a magic phrase, sanctuary city, and that means something. I mean, you got to be very specific about what you're actually talking about, and not just repeat something that's a talking point that's used to try to further an agenda.
Right. So that was I think the question is an attempt to get clarification on that very point, asking if, since New York calls itself that, and whether it's applicable or not, can they turn away any migrants? Is it possible for them to turn them away if they're sent there?
New York State, they're doing it here in New York State.
Here's the thing: the state doesn't have a border. Like the state isn't a country. Once they're in the U.S., a state can't say you can't kick somebody out of the state. Right? We don't support people from the state. And the law in New York is anyone homeless, we have to take care of them. We got to provide them shelter and care. And so, what are we going to do?
Right,
Mike, they have made, as I mentioned to you earlier, there are 12 counties up here that said no to migrants.
They're saying they're not going to provide the assistance.
Right, exactly. And they have stopped them from coming. And that's been happening ever since this. They took some in, but then after they took those few in, they said no more.
So if
So
someone were to show
the
up, how would they kick them out? Like, let's say someone had a place to stay there. What would happen? What
it's temporary,
do you mean?
maybe 3 to 6 months.
What do you mean
But
temporary?
They could
They-
stay, but they stated, they had, what is it, an injunction or temporary?
Okay, it'd be a temporary restraining order. I got you.
Right.
Right.
So they say, oh, you can
I'm
stay
saying
here
just-
3 to 6 months.
Yeah,
But you
it's
have to
just
go
the
back.
county deporting someone, right? I mean, that's not a thing. They can refuse services, and right, they can try to push back against the policy and say we're not going to cooperate, or our law enforcement is going to be directed to act a certain way. But when you're talking about someone physically being there, I mean, how is the county going to come in and deport them back to Central America?
Oh, no, they're not saying that. They're taking them, they have to go back to New York City. I mean, they
Right.
can't deport them
I
like
think
that.
there's-
How are they going
is
to
there-
How are they going to do that? Even
I
they
think,
we're not going to provide any assistance.
is it a preemptive thing? Because I think, isn't Mayor Adams, one thing he was asking the governor for is to try to get some of the other counties and cities to help. And
Yeah.
so maybe it's a preemptive
Right.
thing. They're like, look, we don't want to participate in this.
Absolutely. The state is saying that, the governor is saying that, and the counties,
Right.
the upstate are saying that. They're all saying that. They're saying New York
Yeah,
City
they are.
has to take the entire responsibility.
Right.
Yep.
Maybe it's
That's what they're
preemptive.
saying.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think what Sheba is saying is that they're not providing shelter for them.
So are they there and they're not providing shelter? Is that
They provided shelter, but I think it's limited. The time is limited.
And they're trying
it's
to
not-
discourage people from coming up there, basically.
Right.
They're saying our policies are not
So
friendly.
they limit,
Not
I
gonna-
think the time from what
not
I
gonna have
see.
an environment that you're gonna want to be in.
right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big issue. It's a big problem, and
It is.
the ability to take care of the migrants, to be able to help them in a respectable manner, is one that needs to be looked at. But also looking at New Yorkers' needs and the budget that's supposed to serve them as well is going to be important.
Yeah, because within New York State, they have a lot of they're fighting homelessness and food insecurities. So they
Right.
don't need to add to that. And it's not that they're not thinking about not being compassionate, but they are probably stretched to the limit. When it
Well, yeah,
comes,
capacity is probably at an issue.
yeah.
And don't forget, we're also still, kind of coming out of budget issues or income issues due to the COVID extended
Right.
lockdown period. So a lot of people are running it to the line.
Yeah.
Just saw, this might be the legislation that Lixa in the chat was mentioning in 2017. There was an assembly bill dubbed the New York State Liberty Act.
Mm.
Now, this looks like it was only passed by the assembly. I'm not sure if this was actually passed by the Senate as well and signed by the governor. But what it would do is would prohibit state and local police from conducting stops or arrests based solely on perceived immigration status, and
Right.
prevent government agencies from inquiring about immigration status. And
And
that's
to your
something
point, it's
that New
different.
York City certainly adheres to. I mean, it might be
Right.
different across the state, but in New York City, the NYPD doesn't ask, or they're not allowed to ask you what your immigration status is if you were to call them to report a crime, let's say, or if you're interacting. They're not supposed to go there even. Some people are afraid that they will, or it'll be discovered, right? And they don't. This is oftentimes why immigrant communities are victimized by crime, because the perpetrators know that the immigrants will be reluctant to call the police out of fear that their immigration status could be questioned, right? And
Right.
so they get preyed upon more because of that. So
Right.
in New York City, the cops are not allowed to interrogate or ask you what your immigration status is in an interaction like that. So it looks
But I
like in
think that-
2017, something was passed by the assembly that would apply that principle statewide. From what I'm seeing here, so the city council passed a resolution celebrating that and saying, yes, we are a sanctuary city. They use that phrase in this particular resolution, but it says that the assembly passed it, which suggests to me that it was not passed and signed into law by the whole state.
But I think that also speaks to your point, Mike, when you were saying that technically refers to something different than what we're seeing with the migrant crisis, right? That's
Definitely.
that's about police stopping people that are here and basically give me your papers type of thing. Whereas the migrant crisis is a little bit different than that.
Here
It's
we
not
go. To follow up on that point, in 2017, so it looks like the assembly passed this in February of 2017. In September of 2017, Governor Cuomo issued an executive order prohibiting state agencies and officers from inquiring about or disclosing an individual's immigration status unless required by law or necessary to determine eligibility for a benefit or service. And so from what I'm gathering here, the Senate did not actually pass it. It was an executive order enacted by the governor. But again, that's something different. The context of that is a little different.
right. Yeah. So it's I mean, it's kind of crazy to see how, you know, I mean, I'm not a fan of Adams in a lot of things, but you know, I think the reality that he's facing in this specific instance, I mean, it's not hyperbole to say that, you know, we're gonna have a budget crisis. We're gonna lose, you know, we're gonna have to cut places. We're gonna have to cut some things to be able to continue the way we're continuing without help.
It just seems like everyone has jumped on his saying that the migrants will destroy New York City.
Right. I think if he said it that way, I can understand that. If he said it like this crisis will destroy New York City, I think it's a little different. But I think even saying
Words get twisted, right? I guess we should
right.
exact quote. But
even saying that,
I think he's using the word destroy, right? Because even if he were to say this crisis will destroy New York City, you know, the tweet, right? Here we go. The first tweet is going to be he just said immigrants will destroy New York City.
it's not the tweet. It's going to be the person behind it that wants to make a specific point. They want to uphold their very biased point, and we talked about it earlier. They're retreating to their tribe sides, and they're talking.
Being constrained by 140 characters or whatever it is, right? There isn't much room to be like, well, what he said was this, but what he actually meant was this, but what I think is this. It's just no. He said, because I only have one sentence to say this. He said immigrants are going to destroy New York City. Full stop. Boom. Next tweet.
Do more than one tweet. Just you're not limited by only tweeting one.
But that's not how the platform really works.
It is. People do threads all the time.
They do, and that's a workaround. That's like a loophole for Twitter.
So okay, so Lix's she says, I regress. Can Adams, I guess she's adjusting her question. Can Adams turn away the migrants as a sanctuary city? But I think it's still the same thing. Like sanctuary city in that context isn't necessarily what that means.
Right.
It's how it's being talked about.
Right.
It was more meant to say that, you know, if you are here, we're not going to be letting ICE run up in your houses and your schools to get away from it. You can still, you know, live here without that fear. Whereas migrants being shipped to New York City isn't a part of that. It's more other places taking advantage of the law that New York says we have to provide for anyone that's homeless. And they're like, okay, well, New York has to provide for homeless. Well, let's send them a bunch of people who are going to be homeless, and they have to take care of them.
And that's how people are twisting it around. So we can say, well, the policy of New York City was never, we want an unlimited number of migrants to come in. But then people on the other side who disagree with the policies that are in place will say, well, yes, that is the policy. Effectively, that is your policy, right? Because you know that's going to happen when these are your laws. And this is what, you know, this is the system that you are constrained by.
Right. And you know, it's funny, it's like, see, people are making that distinction, but no one is saying, like, for example, Abbott and other places are shipping migrants up to New York because they have that law in place that they have to take care of the homeless. No one's saying, well, okay, but you're doing that, but that's also saying that you're acknowledging that you won't take care of your homeless. Even though they're making the distinction, those places are making the distinction that these aren't our people, but still in the same context.
I'll say we can't really get into this because it'll open up a whole other can of worms that we can talk about for an hour. Well, the difference is, you know, people came legally versus illegally, and that's a whole big conversation.
Yeah, and that's what that people do.
Mike, I've done that. Tell not to over. I'm sorry, Jay, not to over talk over you.
Go ahead.
But I've been to 2 naturalization ceremonies.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, that, like you said, that will open another can of worms. I think we better just like,
We could talk about that next week even. I mean,
Right. Let's just say this,
talk
that
about Ellis Island and all these things that predate our current immigration
yeah,
law framework. Then there's the question of the legality of the asylum seekers themselves. I mean,
yeah,
it's a whole big mess.
yeah, it
let's
is.
just say
It
this,
really
and
is.
hopefully we can table it after, and I think it might at least need to be said, at least punctuated, is that migrants coming here for asylum are not illegal. They don't have illegal status, because it is legal for them to seek asylum. So I think that needs to at least be said.
As a general point, yes, but that gets murky.
Sure.
So we start looking at the
Yeah.
process and everything. So I just, real quick, we got to wrap up, but I wanted to
Right.
pull up that Adams quote about destroying New York. We want to be
Right.
specific, right? In all fairness, did he say it was immigrants? Did he say it was migrants? He said this issue will destroy New York City. That's his direct quote. He said, never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City. So he said this issue, right? But people are taking that all kinds of ways to serve their narrative, right?
Of
And
course.
you have people say, he said immigrants will destroy New York City.
Right,
No.
right. And listen, I have to agree with that quote, because he said he doesn't see an end in sight. As
Yeah.
long as migrants are going to
I
keep
agree.
coming here, and people seeking asylum and other states are going to send them to New York City, I mean, that steady stream is not going to stop. And so
No.
there is no real end in sight, because those other places are not going to step up, because they have whatever their reasons, especially Texas and those places. So
Right.
New York is going to keep getting funneled in, and that means the budget crunch is going to keep getting worse and worse, and the resources for not only the migrants that they're trying to help, but also the New Yorkers is going to get spread thinner and thinner.
Yeah. So that might be the note on which to end this
I
discussion.
have to tell you, I'm gonna run. I'm down to 16%.
Yeah, we're wrapping up right now.
We need to wrap up right now. Really quick, I want to shout out the Ozone Park Block Association here. They had their gala. Sheba, at the top of the show, you were talking about the event you went to where they were honoring people who did good things in the community.
Yes.
That's what they did in Ozone Park at their second annual awards gala. I was happy to go, and I got this gift bag from them. You know, different people, business owners. So this is my stick from the rally. I put that in there. But different business owners and people in the community gave out little goodies and whatnot. Some gave discounts on their business, gift cards, magnets, promo items, and so forth. So it was really cool. And here's the program. You can see, really cool. Congratulations to all the honorees. These right here are, I guess, glow sticks, you would call them.
Oh, wow.
The styrofoam.
Nice.
Oh, here we go. Here you go. And so
Okay.
this is
I didn't know
what
you like
Twitter
Star
has
Wars.
become,
But
right,
yeah.
the X. But yeah, so very cool
You're in
event.
a Darth Vader mood.
That's right. That's right. Very cool.
Yes.
Of course, it had a DJ, so people were dancing and using the glow sticks. And what have you.
I'm down to 15%.
I think over 600
My phone's
people.
gonna-
I think over
my
600
phone's
people
gonna cut
attended.
off. I'm gonna say goodnight. I'm down to 15%,
Okay.
but the conversation was good. I really enjoyed it.
Yes.
So
Thank you for joining us as always, Sheba. So I guess that means that Jay gives us the bottom line.
The bottom line is that we have to acknowledge that there is nuance in all sorts of discussions, and we can't retreat to our tribalism if we expect any sort of progress or consensus on things going forward. So we need to be mindful of not only the positions and the hopes and aspirations that we have, but also the realities that we're facing, so that we can come together with both and try to make something flourish that works for everyone.
yeah.
All said, of course, you can find us on YouTube at Nuance Show, Instagram as well. Everywhere podcasts are available. Subscribe, get a push right to your device. I believe we just surpassed, what was it, 80,000 views on YouTube, was it?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. We are marching towards that big 100,000 milestone. We will have to celebrate that somehow when we hit that number. In the meantime, thank you all for joining us. We've got work to do, and we'll catch you next week.